Mimic/Skinwalker, my strange encounter in northern New Mexico. So, a little backstory. My friends and I have been hiking and backpacking over the area multiple times, at least once a year on a good long multi-day backpacking trip. A few times in the same location, and other than car problems and sometimes friends not bringing the right gear, we've never had any issues. This specific trip was a 6-mile in, 6-mile out, 6,000 total elevation shift, both ways trip to a lake. We did it in October, so we were preparing for extreme colds, potentially below freezing at night. There were only 3 of us and we were all geared up for this. I was probably the least geared out of the trio, and I knew I'd be perfectly comfortable. So we began the trek. It took us until end of the day, and we get to the lake no problem. Set up camp and just enjoyed ourselves to the sounds of nature, some MREs and a couple pints of whiskey. At the end of the night we all settle into our sleeping quarters, myself in a small tent, my friend in a hammock right next to me around the fire pit, and our other friend some distance away from us in a tent. Now it's important to note that my friend in the hammock was camped right next to me, maybe 10 feet away, while our other friend was probably 100 feet away or so. I had trouble sleeping, was restless, and even though I was warm I kept getting shivers frequently and tossing and turning in my sleeping bag, which I just attributed to the cold. I didn't think anything of this at the time, and eventually I began to drift to sleep. The forest around was quiet, with the occasional sound of insects buzzing or a bird taking flight from a tree. That's when I was awoken by the sound of my friend's voice. Clear as day, I was groggy and a little confused as to why he was waking me up, but I clearly heard him say, quote, "My name. Help me." I immediately froze as he sounded really desperate and said, "My name. Help me," again. Then before I got the chance to speak I heard the voice again. "My name. Help. I have to pee." And then he laughed in a way that sincerely only my friend does. It was a giggle that I'd known him to have since we had met many years ago, and so I responded with, "Haha, fuck off, his name. I'm trying to sleep." And I thought that he was just trying to be funny. Thinking back on it, it would be very out of character for him to wake me up to pull some kind of stupid joke like that, but I was half asleep and I wrote it off. Although I knew something didn't feel quite right about it, I decided to just ignore him and let him do his business. He persisted. "Help. I need you. Come out here." I just mumbled about going back to sleep and to just go if he needed to. My memory's a little foggy as to how we conversed back and forth and what exactly was said, but afterwards I had noticed that he hadn't made any noise to leave to go pee or get back in his hammock as I was trying to fall back asleep, which I found odd, but again brushed off as nothing. Once the voice had been gone for a while, and I assumed he had quietly gone back to his hammock, I realized I had to pee badly and wasn't going to get any sleep until I did, so I got out of my tent and immediately walked over to his hammock to pull the same stun he had on me, calling his name in a joking manner and waking him up to let him know I was there. But when he woke up, he was immediately thrown off by this. That's when I told him I was just gonna pee like you had told me you were a bit ago. Maybe 15 minutes had passed, not enough time for someone to get back into their multi-layer cold weather hammock setup and fall deeply asleep again. Not to mention, he hadn't made a sound since our conversation stopped. He asked me what the hell I was talking about, and I asked him over and over if he was just outside my tent. He swore up and down he had been asleep since he laid down in the hammock and never once got out of his hammock. That's when I felt the real chills go down my spine. Whatever had been outside my tent asking help in this high-pitched mocking voice that my friend would sometimes joke with was not him. I told him, "Oh, okay, it was nothing," and then I proceeded to go pee, keeping eyes on my surroundings the whole time. Eventually, I was able to get back to my tent, warm up and get drowsy enough to sleep. Even though the events that had just transpired terrified me to the core, I am well aware of the lore of the areas around northern New Mexico, and I wouldn't be the first of my friends to go missing without a trace had I opened my tent and followed the voice that night. Somehow I shook it off and was tired enough to start drifting to sleep after I got cozied up. That's when it actually tried to get me. The half-awake state between sleeping and awake, you know, the place where you suddenly feel like you're falling but get jolted awake, except this time I wasn't falling. Something had grabbed onto my tent and was dragging at what felt like 50 miles an hour across the forest floor. I felt every bump when the tent was hitting tree stumps and rocks, destroying my tent and thrashing me around viciously as I was being pulled at an insane speed through the trees, seemingly in a straight line, though which didn't make any sense in hindsight with how dense the trees are here. I yelled out and could feel my vocal cords moving, but very little sound came out. I must have traveled a good several hundred feet like this. That's when I opened my eyes. The only thing that I felt different was the tent was no longer moving. During this weird trance state of being dragged in my tent, everything looked identical. I was perfectly aware of my surroundings. It felt nothing like a dream. However, when I finally opened my eyes, I was laying in my tent, seemingly undisturbed and unharmed. I called out to my friend, feeling bad for waking him up, but needing to know that this was reality, as last place felt so real. He gradually woke up and said something back to me before going back to sleep. His response sounded legit to me. I thought that actually sounded like him, realizing that whatever I had heard earlier was so far from anything he would actually do or say. That thing that called out to me in a high-pitched, whiny voice, mimicking my friend saying, "Help, help me. I need help, I have to pee. Come out here." It still weirds me out to this day. After asking him about it the next morning, he just laughed and swore to me that he absolutely did not get up in the middle of the night and say anything to me, much less try to joke with me about getting out of my tent to help him. Whatever that was, specifically targeted me. My friends have been back there since, but I opted out of that trip. The Tinder Stalker. I matched with a man on Tinder one day. The conversation got spicy and I gave him my number so we can continue chatting. We texted that night. We never exchanged photos or nudes or anything like that. Never made plans to meet up. The conversation died and I forgot about them. Weeks go by and I deleted the conversation. Then, late one night, I got a lewd photo of a man I don't recognize. I think of insulting them but decide to just delete it and not respond. A few weeks later I get another one. I have the idea to check my deleted messages to make sure I don't know them. Sure enough, I find out that it's the Tinder guy. It's really weird of them to text me a month later, just lewd images after no contact or anything for over a month. Ew. So I blocked them. A couple weeks later I get a lewd video on my Apple Watch. It's the same guy. I'm not sure how I got the message on my watch. If I already blocked his number, I block him again on my watch. What a weirdo, I think. A week later I leave my apartment to go on a walk. I see him. He is right there in front of my apartment walking towards me. He has the same outfit on as his profile photos and the same tattoos and a hat, so I am certain it is them. I never mentioned where I lived. I'm freaked out. But I'm dressed in baggy clothes and recently changed up my hair color, so I keep my head down in hopes he doesn't recognize me. I walk right past him. I was too scared to look at him to see his reaction if he recognized me. I was too scared to look back in his direction to see where he went, so I just kept walking forward. I was severely freaked out, but nothing else happened after that and I never saw them again. I never mentioned where I lived, so my only thought is he must have used my phone number to look me up. It was the least likely person I would have expected. Just some random person I messaged for only one day on Tinder. Even with the lewd content they sent, I still just thought they were a regular perv. I never expected them to somehow show up at my apartment. They didn't even text a word to me or attempt to meet up. They just sent lewds over 2 months and they appeared. It's just so random and weird. I think their motive was definitely something as perverted. It gives me creeps to think about what they wanted. But I'm glad they left me alone. I never give out my real phone number to dates anymore. Convenience store creep. This was 11 years ago. I was 19, working at a gas station that's part of a chain in my area. There were these 2 guys who were Marines that would come in regularly. The one guy was of Asian descent and would always try to flirt with me. I acted oblivious to it and went on with my day. After they had been coming in for a while, he asked me out. This guy was 35. I carded him when he bought cigarettes because our store was super strict about carding everyone, so I knew his age. I said no and kept it professional and asked if he needed anything else. He would ask me out every time he came in and would get more and more frustrated when I said no. Just his body language and whole mood changed when I said no. I told my manager he was making me uncomfortable and she didn't seem to care and said to treat all customers with respect. Couple months later, my friend was looking for a used car on Craigslist, and she decided to look at the missed connection section to laugh at all the posts on there. It's not a thing anymore, but it used to be kind of like a dating section where you could post about seeing someone you were interested in but didn't get to exchange numbers or talk or whatever. Lo and behold, this guy posted one with my name and the name of the store I worked in the town. I don't have the most common first name, and I'm the only person there with that name. They had to wear name tags, and I knew 100% it was me. It was about how he saw me at work, thought I was pretty and wanted to go on dates with me. I was just so creeped out. I showed my dad, and he emailed the guy from the listing telling him to fuck right off. I printed it and showed my boss, and this bitch told me to just go on a date with him and say you're not interested. I was livid. About a week later, this guy's friend came in alone. Mind you, these men are Marines and not small guys. I ring him up and he asked me, "What's your fucking problem? You don't want to go out with my friend because he's Asian. He really likes you." Racist. I stood my ground and said, "I won't go out with your friend because he's 35 and he's harassing me." Luckily, that was the last I saw either of them. I got fired about a week later and got another job waiting tables. Never saw that guy again and hope I never do. Manager fired me for no reason. I found out years later she got fired for unlawful termination. She fired anyone she didn't like for personal reasons. I hope she never has a daughter. To the Marine that harassed me, I hope we never meet again.